Hey everyone, this is Lauren here at Mill City Roasters. One of the things that we get asked about a lot in classes and online and on the phone is how can I become a better coffee taster? As an instructor, I have found a couple exercises that students and myself have found really helpful in really honing in on your sensory skill. When it comes to tasting, I find it easier to taste by comparison. That means like having more than one coffee on the cupping table, or even pour yourself 2 cups of coffee in the morning, one blend, one single origin, 2 different single origins, and just sit with that and think about what's tasting different. That can make it a lot easier than just tasting a cup of coffee and trying to describe it without another point of reference. I wanted to introduce you to an exercise just called a triangulation. If you watch or if you've observed in person any of the U.S. Coffee Tasters Championships, you'll be familiar with the triangulation. It's a way of setting up a coffee tasting that is kind of an odd man out. What I've got here are 2 triangulations, and I'm going to talk about the 2 different styles that I like to utilize in class. But basically, you've got 3 coffees. They're set up in a triangle pattern, and 2 of these cups are the same, and 1 is different. Now this challenge obviously works best if you have not been the one to set it up, so that you don't know which coffee is the one that is the outlier. But I've set up plenty of these for myself, and I just try to kind of jumble them and not pay attention to where I'm putting things. The way that I'll know after tasting if my guess was correct is the bottom of the cup is actually marked with a little dry erase pen. This also kind of highlights one of my favorite ways to teach, which is through competition. If you've got a couple people in your roastery or in your cafe and you all want to take on a challenge, it's fun to compete at a triangulation because when you're competing with your friends or your coworkers or family members, I think we try a little bit harder. I think we focus a little bit more because we really want to be right. So I like to set up triangulations in class and actually challenge the students to see who can have the most correct, identified cups. Now, if you watch U.S. Cup Tasters Championships online, you'll see that they've got 6 triangulations set up all in a row. They taste really quickly. As soon as they've identified the cup that they think is different, they pick it up and set it away from the group. If we're in a class setting, or even if you're doing this with a group of colleagues, you're not going to want to disrupt the cup. Instead, what I have people do is grab a piece of paper and either mark A, B, C, or 1, 2, 3, and then kind of circle that number or that letter as this is the cup that I thought didn't belong to the set. And then at the end, we can kind of go through the lineup and do a nice, big, fun reveal where, the majority of people thought it was 2 or B, and I'll pick that up and see if there's a dot on the bottom of it. The easiest way to set up a triangulation like this is not actually to do a full cupping, but instead to have some coffees batch brewed and then pull from those batches. This means that you can set up a bunch of triangulations using just 2 or 3 coffees and set them up in different configurations. It gets really challenging when the same coffee is appearing on the table a couple times because you start to second guess yourself and you don't know if your guesses are correct anymore because something tastes familiar to what you tasted before. The reason that triangulation is such a good tool for sensory skill building is it forces you to hone in on really specific aspects of the coffee. Especially if you have several triangulations set up all together, you can get a little overwhelmed with what we call palate fatigue, where things start to taste the same. With triangulations, you know that one of these coffees is different. So rather than thinking of what everything is tasting like in every cup, the acidity, the sweetness, the flavor, the nuance, the aftertaste, I try to just isolate variables. I'll go through a cupping like this or a triangulation like this and think just about body. Which coffee has a body that's a little bit different, that tactile note, that mouthfeel. I'll do the same thing with acidity. Which one is tasting brighter? Are 2 of these tasting brighter and the other one is a little bit dull? I bet that one's the one that doesn't belong. This forces you to think about coffee flavor in those specific categories that we find on the cupping form. A lot of people, like I said, when they're trying to learn how to become really good coffee tasters and they're tasting coffee in a critical way for the first time, find that thinking about all of those categories on the cupping form is just a really big challenge. Triangulation gives you a chance to sort of strip away a lot of the extra information and just focus on one thing. So imagine I had a bunch of these triangulations set up. I would still have my rinse water here, my cupping spoon. I might use a spit cup, which is pretty standard practice for when we're tasting coffee. As you start to swallow coffees, that aftertaste kind of carries with you to the next set, so it does become harder to taste. So if this was a real challenge where I was taking it very seriously, I would be spitting everything out. But you basically just taste, just like you would for a cupping. Try not to take it too seriously. And if you need to go around once or twice, I find it helpful sometimes to change up my order. And you start to have an idea of what coffees are similar. For me right now, the biggest difference in one of these cups is acidity. One of these cups is much brighter and feels a lot more acidic, perceived acidity, especially at the front of the palate. For me, that's this one. So I would pick that up and set it back. Now again, if I was part of a group, I would just make a note, I think it's that third cup, and I would move on. At the end, we have the chance to pick it up and look for a red dot, which there is a little red dot on the bottom. So this coffee is very different than these other two. These were from the same air pot that we've got, just going in our roastery right now for our morning coffee. So again, you could put, 2 from this pot, 1 from that pot, and then jumble it up. You could actually use the same coffees for the whole table and just change the order and the configuration. Now, another way to kind of use the triangulation model, in these cups, I have dry grounds. Measured out just like I would for cupping, just a little around 11 grams, 11 and a half grams for these bowls. And again, 2 of these cups are the same and 1 is different. I don't know which one it is, but the point here is to get better at that dry fragrance step just by smelling these grounds. And same thing, trying to pick out the one that doesn't go along with its partner. The only thing to consider here is you want to match roast color pretty closely, because it's easy to see in these cupping bowls if one of these coffees was roasted a lot lighter or a lot darker than other coffees. So for that reason, this is going to work really well if the coffees are all sample roast level, or if they're all very closely related to the same roast level or degree of roast. You could set up a whole table like this with dry grounds. I've even done triangulation with full cuppings. So go through first dry, and then pour water, get it wet, do the break, skim, and then taste. That is a really nice way to kind of confirm your guesses, because you get to experience the coffee over and over and over again as it changes at the cupping table. And by the end of the full cupping, which might be 20, 25 minutes, you're pretty fairly confident about which cup you think doesn't belong. How can we make triangulations harder? Use coffees that are really similar. For people who are new coffee tasters who are trying to get better at tasting coffee, I start with really different coffees. Maybe a coffee from Sumatra, a coffee from Brazil, maybe a natural Ethiopia. Coffees that are extremely different and have very, very different tasting notes are going to be much easier to pick and to discern, the odd man out. As you get better at triangulation and you get better at tasting coffee, maybe we'll put 2 Guatemalas next to El Salvador or Honduras. Or maybe we'll put all Colombias on the table, and they'll just be from different regions. You can do this with degree of roast. You can do this with processing method. You can even do it with different brew variables. So I could brew a pot of coffee at my normal parameters, at my golden ratio, 1:17, 1:16, try to get the TDS really in that ideal range, and then brew another pot where those variables have been intentionally sort of dialed out of the ideal range. And so I have a cup that's under-extracted or over-extracted, and maybe that's the cup that doesn't belong. Now you've got the same coffee on the table, but you're learning to identify issues with brew variables, brew strength, or parameters. The triangulation exercise is a really nice way to sort of force yourself to focus on, individual aspects of coffee, and you don't need a lot of coffee or a lot of space to do this. I hope that this exercise is something that you'll do at work, in your roastery, or at home. If you do, let us know. Put something in the comments, let us know how it went for you. And I'm going to keep sharing some of the things that I have students and judges do to become better tasters and to become more critical in the way that they taste coffee. If there's something that you want to see or a skill that you want to become better at, let us know and we'll try to do a video on it. Thanks guys, have a good day.